Okay, hello, this is Dave Manel. I'm going to be starting now. Today's webinar is going to be on the banking features and accounting power, a little bit on setting up banks, a lot of little tips about different features we have for the BankRec, and then at the very end, just a tiny bit about the different options for importing bank transactions. Okay, so here we go. What I'm going to be showing once again is how to set up the banks, various features for bank reconciliation, some tips on avoiding and fixing errors, the bank import options, and I'm going to be showing this program with the new interface. And so because of that, some screens will look different to you, and I'm going to give you some tips on navigation. But there's going to be a more complete webinar on the new interface, and it's important for everyone to attend, and the date and time will be emailed to all of our customers. Okay, so let's get started here. The very first thing I want to do is how to set up a bank. So what you do to set up a bank, typically you're just going to go into the chart of accounts and add a new account. So you would come down here. This is different, the way you add things. And this button is kind of universal throughout the new system. Whenever you want to add something, add a new invoice, add a new bank, a new account, or anything like that, you come to the plus button and you click on it. So once you click on that, the little pop-up comes for entering bank information. You enter the account number, the description of the bank, what type of an account. Of course, it's an asset. It's a current asset. And then you make sure that you select cash. Once you select that it's a cash account, there's going to be a little checkbox, create bank. So you have to make sure that you check that box. You don't really have to make sure. You could also go into setup bank screen and do it from there, but it's much easier this way. So you do that. So the next step, after you've set up the account number for the bank, is you have to go in and finish the bank setup. Now in the new system, setting up of almost everything that's a setup is done from the right pane over here, and you choose the gear icon. So earlier when I was in the chart of accounts screen, I had to come here, I clicked on the gear and went to accounts. And now when I want to go to credit banks and credit cards to set up, I just would come and click on that. And it would bring me in to the screen for setting up the bank. Since I had said that I wanted to set up the bank, information that could be brought over was brought over from the chart of accounts. The question, primary bank. Now what primary bank does is it will cause this bank to be the default bank on all screens wherever you select the bank. So if I'm in cash receipts, if I'm in the check writing screen, the bank that will default will be this bank. Once you're in one of those screens, if you change the bank and you're doing several transactions, it will always remember the one that you were just on. So you don't have to keep on changing it back to the other bank. So in this case, you notice that when I go to write a check, the default bank will be 1008 Bank of North America. Let me just mention one other thing, which I didn't mention when I first got started. Any questions, you can ask me any questions you want. I will try to answer them. Usually I answer them at the end of the webinar, and if it's something I can't answer quickly at the end, I will always make sure that I get an answer to you later. I appreciate any and all comments that you have to give me about the product. In this case, maybe since you're going to be seeing some new features, I appreciate comments about what you think of the new look and feel of the program. I appreciate comments on what you would want in a future webinar or anything. And one other thing, this webinar on the bank reconciliation and everything, it's kind of, I mean, there's a lot of little details, but since it's a small feature that I'm showing, it will not take the whole hour that I would normally take on a webinar. And I'm sure your time is valuable, and so I'm going to try to make sure I get through it in the proper speed. Not too fast, but not too slow. Anyway, let's get going. So that's what the primary bank would do. Some of these other things, I mean, they're pretty straightforward. If you're going to be printing checks or anything, you have to enter the routing number, the account number. You want to have the complete address, so it'll go in there. Fraction's a little thing that prints on some checks. I actually don't understand the reasoning for it, but you'll know if you need it on a check. These features here, inactive, will keep it from appearing on the drop downs. It doesn't delete the bank. Registered for Yodlee, registered for merchant account, and digital checks enabled. These are for different features that we have for importing bank statements, for accepting credit cards, and also for accepting and making digital payments. Although those are things for a different webinar. Okay, one reason you would be setting up a bank is if you're just setting up a brand new client. And when you're setting up a new client, it's very likely that you've been doing BankRecs for that client up until now. So you don't want, if you're doing it in the middle of the year, you don't want to have to do all the BankRecs to bring it up to date to whatever period you're starting to enter transactions for. So you'll come here, you click on change date, and you enter the first date of the reconciliation month that you want to do. So if I wanted a reconciliation for the month of May, I would put in May 1st, 2019. Now, when you do that, it's not going to look at any transactions or anything from before May, but you most likely will have some outstanding transactions that you want to be in the initial bank reconciliation that you do. So in order to do that, you're going to go to this area over here where it says related actions. A little bit more about the new interface. Basically, all actions are on this bar at the bottom. And once we have more than a few of them, if extra ones will be in the related actions. These are things that are used less frequently. So in this case, I come over, I click on related actions. It's going to pull up a little pop-up, and it's going to say outstanding transactions. So I would click on that, and that's going to take me to the screen where I would enter all the outstanding checks that are, and deposits that have not cleared yet. So you just enter it, you say if it's a check, the reference number, the date, and the various information, very straightforward. And once you're done entering it, you click on reconciliation, which will take you to the reconciliation screen. And from there, you would see the outstanding transactions that you had just entered. Just one second. Sorry, had to get a little drink. Okay, so now let's move on to some other things. The actual bank reconciliation itself. So the first question is, well, with the new system, how do I get to the bank reconciliation? And the way the system works now is basically all things that you are doing transactions and entering information on a day-to-day basis are on this left menu. So what I would do to get a bank rec, I would go to banking, hover over it, and it pulls up the menu from underneath, and then I would just click on reconciliation. Same thing would apply if I wanted to do a journal entry. I would just go to write up, hover over it, and then go to general journal. So basically all transactional type things that you're doing daily are on the left menu. Things like setup, they're on the right menu. And up on the top are things that are more firm rather than client based. And on the bottom, as I mentioned before, these are the action buttons. So anyway, now here I am. I'm in the bank rec. And so the first step is I want to select which account do I want to do. So in this case, I want it to be the cash checking account 1000, not the one that I just set up 1008. So I selected 1000 from the drop down. Now you'll notice when you're looking at this, it's basically a numerical order, but the top one is always the one which is the default bank. So the default bank will be at the top, and then the others are in numerical order. So I select this account. One thing I want to point out about this account, you may have noticed when I was at the chart of accounts, I had a couple of sub accounts. And this is the one that I'm reconciling, account number 1000, and I have two cash accounts that are sub accounts for it. Anytime you have sub accounts for a cash account, they're all together into one bank rec. So this is a bank rec for account number 1000, 1001, and 1003, because basically they're all the same bank account. Okay, now this is an area that usually you won't be using, but you can change if you only want to see disbursements and the side over here, or receipts only and the side. Typically, you'd only want to be using this maybe if you wanted the screen to be a little smaller, or if you were on a device, maybe a pad or something where the screen wasn't quite as large, so you didn't have all the real estate that you would want on the screen. So what you do, you pick which one you want. I wanted disbursements only, and now it just shows the disbursements and also the charges and the reconciliation summary. And this brings up another feature with the new interface. Over here we have this little hamburger button, and the purpose of the hamburger is to collapse or expand the menu on the side, this menu here, banking, sales, expenses. So sometimes you may be on a screen where you need a little bit more real estate on the screen. So what you can do is you just click on that button, the hamburger, and then it will collapse and the menu part won't be there anymore. Most screens you won't really need this, although maybe on the trial balance screen or a couple of other spots it might come in handy. So anyway, this is called the hamburger button. You click on that, it expands the menu or it hides the menu. Credit card reconciliation. Credit card reconciliation is a feature we added maybe a couple of years ago, and this is almost identical to doing the bank reconciliation. You look at the charges, and you look at the payments, and then you click off whatever was cleared, and whatever is still outstanding. You take care of balancing it. The main difference is really just a couple of terms on the screens, charges. We're looking at charges here instead of checks, things like that. A couple of features that we have on the bottom, we have printing. Some of these I'm going to touch a little bit more later, or at least the printing I will touch a little bit more later. We have the ability to automatically go into Cloud Cabinet. We have the ability to attach a document. So let's say if I have a bank reconciliation in front of me and a bank statement, I can just upload that into the system. So then I always have that there to pull up again. And once again, back to that little hamburger button. Now I want the menu back, so I'm going to click on it and bring it back. Okay, so now some features to help you do the bank rec. We have this button here, which can either check all the boxes or also uncheck all the boxes. And whether or not you want to use this when you're doing a bank rec really depends upon your processes for doing the bank rec. You may, if you have a lot of checks, a lot of transactions, you may want to click on this. It marks them all. And then as you go down through the list that you're looking at, and if you see any that didn't clear, then you unclick them. I personally think I would kind of do it. Usually I would do it the reverse. I'm going through the list, and as I see them, I click them when I see that they've cleared. But, you know, whichever process best works for you is what's good. Next thing is at the bottom, after you've marked all the checks that cleared from the statement, you can see a total. 5 checks cleared for $25,000, 12 deposits cleared for $53,714.37. And you can compare that to the bank statement that you're looking at to do the bank rec. So it lets you know right off the bat, you know, oops, it says there's 6 checks cleared, but I only marked 5. So you got to go back, find out which one you missed. Total corrections. Although later I'm going to mention that I don't really recommend using this, but sometimes you have to. But this is to balance it if it seems to be out of balance for a reason that you can't find and can't correct. And also up here, we have bank service charges and interest earned. Now, if you're entering transactions for your client, chances are you're going to enter these, they will have already been entered. If you're importing transactions from a bank, chances are they're going to import from the bank and they're already going to be there. So typically, I would not use this feature because I use the other method. But sometimes people, they don't enter this information until they're doing the bank rec. So if you want to use these fields, what you do is you just come in, you enter the amounts from the statement. So I said there was $25 of bank service charges, interest earned $75. But in order to use these fields, you have to, back when we were on that bank setup and credit card setup screen, you have to select the default accounts for finance charge and also for interest income. And when you do use these, they automatically go from there into a transaction. So in this case, I went to the trial balance, I drilled down and I see here's my, or at least here's the debit amount for the bank statement finance charges. So the main point about this is if you're importing or if you're entering all information and you also enter it there, it may be doubled. So you have to do it one way or the other because it's gonna, it would be doubled if you'd already entered it and then you put it there again. Anyway, whether or not you use it is really up to how you want to be doing the bank rec. Okay, once again, back to this total corrections field. The point here is The entry that you used, it's not used to calculate trial balance. Enter a temporary adjustment here to make the amount in the difference field 0 and click reconcile. What that means is whatever you enter here is not going anywhere as far as the system is concerned. All it's there for is to let you balance out the trial balance. I mean, sometimes if you're doing a hard bank rec, it's off by $5, $10, depending upon the kind of dollars involved for your client, and you realize it's really de minimis and it's not worth too much time trying to track it down. You may want to put a number in here. You may also want to put an adjusting journal entry or something to record it. Balance per statement. This is, which isn't really my point here to show you how to do a bank rec, but you get the beginning balance, you have disbursements, you have the outstanding ones, deposits in transit. That'll give you the bank balance, and then you enter the balance per statement. The difference should be 0, and as long as it is, you come down here and click on reconcile, and then it's reconciled. Once you're done reconciling, you may want to print out the statement. You just click on the icon that I mentioned before, the printer. For BankRecs, you're given 2 options. One is if you would like to print the cleared transactions also, and of course the other would be, no, I don't want the cleared transactions to be there. It depends. Sometimes if people have 300-400 transactions on one statement, you don't really want all those pages with the cleared transactions, but that's up to you and whatever your needs are. So in my case, I said yes. A nice little statement comes out, shows the reconciliation. It'll show what checks are still outstanding and all the checks and deposits that cleared. Another thing you can do with the bank rec is you can drill down to transactions. So in this case, we want to look at this transaction. It's $64. Click on it, and it will pull up the actual spot where the transaction came from. And here you can see this is one of my favorite vendors, Big Gulps for All, $64, and it's an employee benefit program. So you can come here, you see, yes, it's the right amount, or you may even notice it wasn't coded right or something, but usually on a bank rec that you're not necessarily looking for how they're coded. You're looking that the numbers are right. Another thing, you can go back and look at prior bank recs. So you can see any bank rec that's in the period of open years. So I still had 2018 open, and I also have 19 open. So I can see all the bank recs from that time frame. Anything before that, you can't view. And the important thing about that is it's when you do the bank rec, it's important for you to print it out and save it. Better yet, to send it to the cloud cabinet so you do have the report from it. So 2 years from now, you want, for whatever reason, you needed to go back and see a bank rec from 2017 or something, you would be able to find it had you saved it. Once you select a prior period, there's a few things that are there that can help you. Number one, you know who reconciled it and on what date it was reconciled. Number two, you have the ability to unreconcile it. The thing to remember about unreconciling a bank account, though, is once you unreconcile it, that period and all subsequent periods are unreconciled also. So if I were to unreconcile 3/31/2019, that means in order to bring it up to date, I would also have to now reconcile April, May, June. I mean, typically it would be easy because you probably haven't really made any major changes, but still you have that additional work to do if you unreconcile. And you cannot unreconcile a period in a closed year. The date field. Bank statements, of course, don't always come in that they're from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. So this is strictly if you have a bank statement that's April 15th to May 15th. You click on change and you enter the date that you want it to be. Now you cannot use this to set a longer period, like if you wanted to do one bank rec for the whole year or something, if you're just doing right up at the end, you can't use it to do more than a 1 month period. You also can't use it to do multiple bank recs in one month. Like if you had a client with a lot of transactions and you wanted to do a weekly reconciliation or something, you cannot use it for that. I just noticed one question here. Where do the attached files get stored? They get stored in the cloud cabinet. And the question, do the bank charges go to finance charges, not bank charges? It's simply whatever account you chose. I just had chose one because I have, for this, it's just a pretend account anyway, but I have bank charges, various charges all in that same account. But it's just whatever account you choose. So anyway, let me go ahead. Okay, bank reconciliation, avoiding and fixing errors. The main thing to avoid errors in bank recs, although I'm not going to show too much here, but the main thing to avoid errors is to follow the proper bank rec process. I'm sure that actually most accountants, most of the people that are here avoiding this, most of the people that are here listening to the webinar, most bookkeepers, they know very well how to do bank recs, probably better than I do, although I have done an occasional bank rec in my day. What I mentioned before, don't enter balancing numbers there unless it's absolutely unavoidable. It's just sometimes it'll come back. Or people sometimes call us and say, well, how come the number isn't the right number there? And it's because they entered a number to balance one previously, and then it caused something in the future. These are all kind of things that are for proper bank rec process anyway. Do not make entries into reconciled periods. Now, in the system, we try to stop you, but there will be some cases where maybe it is necessary. But once you make an entry in a reconciled period, all the bank recs afterwards will have an issue. Close your periods after you've done a bank rec. If you have the clients having the ability to log in and do anything, once a period is closed, a client is not allowed to make any entries in a closed period. And clients, of course, some are excellent and they're good accountants, but some just like to make entries anywhere and everywhere. So even aside from bank recs, this is a very good piece of advice. If the client has the rights to make entries, close periods after you're finished. The accountant can always go in and make entries in a closed period, not in a closed year, but in a closed period. An accountant can always make an entry. And if you needed the client to go back, you can always open a period and then the client can go back into it. If you're giving permissions to your clients, don't give permissions to do bank recs unless you are confident in their abilities. Of course, some larger clients, they have full charge bookkeepers there who I'm sure are better at doing bank recs than I am, and those type of people, it's okay to give them the permission if that's what you want them to be doing. But if you're not confident in the abilities and the client goes in there and does something with the bank rec, it can only give you headaches going forward. And finally, do not reconcile and unreconcile periods unless it's necessary. Sometimes people call and they're wondering, why do I have a problem with the BankRec now? And one of the things we notice is there's a report, which I'm going to show in a minute, which is the change report. And if it will show when a bank has been reconciled, when it's been unreconciled, along with a lot of other important information. And sometimes you'll see that it's been reconciled, unreconciled 10, 12 times. And it's just every time somebody is doing that, they're liable to do something else, which is going to cause an issue. Okay, so those are like tips for avoiding and fixing fixing errors or avoiding errors. The next thing is, what are some ways to fix the errors? One thing is, you're coming here to a BankRec, and whatever you're trying to do, you see it just doesn't balance out, and you're trying to find out why not. You see here that it's $64. You're looking at the bank statement. You see maybe it was $640. So as I showed before, you can drill down from here. You pull up the transaction and you can make whatever change you want to do there to that transaction. And this was a handwritten transaction. That's why it was more likely that that the number entered was incorrect. Because of course, if a check was written through the system, the amount would be matching unless the bank made an error, which occasionally banks will make an error also on what is recorded. This is just to let you know that we do warn you anytime you're making an entry in a reconciled period, and also we warn you anytime an entry is being made into a closed period. So what happens if somebody did make an entry into a reconciled period? They went back in January, they made a $10,000 check for whatever reason. Maybe it had to be done. The beginning book balance in the system, once a BankRec has been done, the previous BankRec, this number is hard-coded to be whatever was the ending balance from the last BankRec. So if somebody went and made a change, there's two things you could do. One, you could go back and unreconcile to that period and then bring them all forward, reconcile all the new ones. If the change had been in January, you'd have to reconcile 6 BankRecs. Another thing you can do is if you click on this button here, beginning book balance, it's going to bring the actual book balance instead of what was on the last statement's ending book balance. It just makes sure the accountants are the ones who should be doing this. Although in reality, it shouldn't be out of balance, but sometimes things do happen. Okay, so let's move on. You just click on that, it'll bring the book balance. When you want to do a report, and I'm going to show the change report because I mentioned how that can help you on with BankRecs, but anytime you want to do a report, you go to the sidebar over here and you click on the little report icon. And that'll bring up a listing of all the reports in the system. In this case, the one I wanted to do was the activity log. And so I would click on activity log and it would bring it up. One thing this does is makes it just one step quicker to go to a report. Instead of having to go to reports, selecting company for reports, and then finding the proper one, you can just come over here and then right away go to the report you want. So anyway, I click on activity log. I bring up that report, choose the dates that I wanted, and then I print the report. Although you will notice on the report that I'm showing, it's a different date because I had to find a client where actually I had entered transactions into a reconciled period. So it wasn't even, but it's just to demonstrate what is available here. So what I can tell here is that yes, back in 2015, David Manel entered transactions into a closed period. And what this can really help you with is if somebody in your staff or if one of your clients seems to have a problem with this, you'll be able to track it down. You'll be able to see what transactions were entered and who did it so that they can be told that they should be watching and not doing it. You'll also see when something was reconciled or unreconciled. And although I don't have one on this, if anyone ever deletes a check or voids things, you'll see it'll show up on this report. There is a lot of good information that appears on the activity log, aside from just things that can help you with the bank rec. Okay, now quickly, I'm not really going into how you upload transactions or anything, but quickly, there's a few different options to upload transactions. You can upload transactions for banks and credit cards. You can use various type of files that the bank will give, an OFX file, a QBO file. A lot of banks now do offer Excel. And also, if you're using bank feeds, you can use bank feeds. Once you import a statement, any transactions that are imported, they're marked as cleared. So you don't have to go through that step. You already know every transaction, since it was imported from the bank, it has to be a cleared transaction. Also, if you're where checks are being written through the system, we'll match them with existing transactions. So if there were 100 transactions written, like as checks, and now you upload the bank statement, it will match them all and you know exactly which ones have cleared. And that makes doing the bank rec that much easier and that much quicker. Okay, so that is basically what I wanted to show for now. I'm going to look in and see a few other questions here. One person says they like that name for the hamburger button. I had actually toyed with having a little picture of a burger to show in the webinar to put there, but even though I like to joke, maybe that was a little bit too much. The question is, do I recommend clicking on beginning book balance link before beginning? No, I would recommend that first you try to reconcile to see if it's been done. You could, because once you bring that number, then it's bringing that number. You could do what I had shown. You could go to the change report to see if anything had been done. Someone here had, I guess, an issue that sometimes opening balances and outstanding checks will not total. If you have that problem, I mean, I would suggest trying to call support. I mean, first I would try to work out and figure out what may have happened where things didn't seem to add up right. But typically, whatever is in the books should be there. Here is someone who they like the new interface. I'm happy to hear that, especially this was for reports. It makes it easier to pull up the reports. I'm not quite sure. I'll ask this question later. What if the date is off by a day or more? I'm not sure, and then there's a couple of people asking, when are these updates going to take place? The ones that I've been showing here today. August. We're planning fairly early in August. We don't have a positive date set yet. If you're having trouble importing with bank feeds with Yodlee, um, I would try to work with the support in order to get it straightened out. Occasionally, because we're dealing with thousands of different banks, or they're dealing with thousands of different banks, there will be a bank that will have issues, and in those cases, sometimes you actually have to try to import using an OFX file or an Excel file. The problem with that is it's not automatic. You may not have the login to the bank. Some clients will give their accountant the login information, and some banks are now offering special login that's just for that feature. I don't know how widespread that is yet, but I have seen it. Okay, there's a question about the drilling down. The drilling down is like when I was in the check screen and I saw that one of the that actually all the checks are in blue, it means I can just click on that blue link, go to the transaction, and either verify that the transaction is correct, or I can also make changes if need be. And this is good for banks, but it's also good for trial balance work. You're doing work and you see something seems to be coded wrong, you drill down to it, you change it to the correct expense account or something, and then you can move forward with that. When upload written checks, is the vendor's name recognized by the system? If it's a written check, the vendor name is only recognized if the bank has given it a name. And I have noticed recently a lot of written checks, somehow the bank, I notice it on my own when I write checks, the bank knows who the vendor was and it comes back. So some banks are doing that. I guess they know by certain information. But otherwise, if it's written and it can't be read and it's not in the bank file, what you have to do, although this isn't really where I'm showing it, but after you import it, you'll go to the write-up screen, and then you can enter the correct vendor name, and also from the vendor name, the default accounts and everything should come there. And here is, will the bank feed recognize vendors that are already programmed? Let me see the whole question. Yeah, when we use Yodlee or Excel, they actually all use the same algorithm once the transactions are in. We look at the vendor name, we try to match the vendor name, and it does a very good job of doing it. And once it knows the vendor, it will select the vendor and also the default expense account, so you don't have to enter any of that information. Occasionally you have a vendor who the name is a little bit different than the name on in the vendor system. The name that comes across in a bank statement is a little bit different, and you can set up an alias for that. So let's say if the vendor is actually Home Depot, but for whatever reason on the bank statement it says the depot or something, you can set up an alias so if it sees the depot, it knows that the depot means Home Depot. And our check image is going to be available with the new update when using Yodlee. No, the check images will not be available. It is something that we look into, but as of now, we don't have the ability to do that. Okay, I guess that's enough for now. I really appreciate you giving me the time to show you the program. I'm always excited to show the program. I think there's a lot of good features, some features people may not know, and I do appreciate any comments that you have for me. My name is David Manel. My phone number is 631-415-9252. And my email, which is better than my phone, is dmunnell@accountantsworld.com. Thank you.